Welcome back to Hacker Hangouts and another Saturday morning, and we are excited to be here. Thank you for bearing with technical difficulties because this is a professional channel and we never make any mistakes ever because that is us now. Thanks for sticking around. Again, if Gowrie has issues or Gord, as he found out in chat, also Brandon, yes, it's auto corrupt now, not auto correct. He's just known as Gord. But today I'm pumped. And I'm pumped for like probably the weirdest reason is I have been like up till like 3 a.m. doing a CTF for NSEC. And as we went to push out live, me and Gowrie had this really funny conversation, which was like, why do you do this to yourself? Why is this a thing? And we ended up getting into a really funny conversation about burnout, and I stopped the conversation. I said we should talk about this on stream. But where are you right now? Your lighting is impeccable, and I'm thinking I might just have to like throw this in front of you just to fix the lighting.
Yeah, no, I like this. Like, we have like a duality going on here. You have the cool lighting on one half of the screen. I have the warm lighting on the other half of this screen, and it's very disorienting in some ways. But no, I'm in Pittsburgh at the moment. My birthday's actually, this week, so we're up with friends and just hanging out, having a good time, and yeah, just getting away from home. I got the dog with me. He's traveling with me now. He's a travel dog, and we're having a good time.
That's good. That's good. And happy birthday or belated birthday. And we won't get into the exact date on the phone because we know someone's taking notes somewhere.
Yeah.
So, okay, let me see the conversation because I'll bring everyone up to speed where we cut off the conversation, which was this idea. Like we've both burned out in our careers multiple times. And it's funny. And I would say burnout on differing levels. I'm going to notice experience buffering. Awesome. I'm going to close this so I don't like get distracted on the side. But we've burnout to different extremes, and it's funny. I never even heard of the term burnout in my life, like up until more and more recently. And I don't know if that's because I'm getting older, so I'm getting farther in my career, or it's just becoming a thing now. But I've yet to talk to like anyone in the field who hasn't experienced some sort of form of burnout. And I'm just like wondering, like, is this part of the career you signed up for? Do you think you get this in other careers? But is this just like normal part of the things?
I think it's definitely, I think it's always been a thing, right? I think that's what I'm coming to realize. I don't think it's something that has necessarily been discussed as much. I think that's one of the results of us being more connected is we start to talk more about things like burnout, more about things like imposter syndrome and stuff like that. And I think possibly, I don't know, this could be projecting in some sense, or maybe just making stuff up. It's possible that it was kind of an understood reality in the past that this is just the way life is, and I think we're contending in some ways with, well, that this isn't necessarily the way life has to be. But also, I do think in some senses, and in skirting the political line here, I do think in some senses, work-life balance, if you will, has gone way more on the productivity side. Like you are expected to be productive at all times of every day, all the time, as opposed to, we'll get the job done when the job gets done and having realistic expectations. I do think there is some level of machine cranking there that just views the human as the cog in the machine. And if you're not efficient enough, we'll just replace you with another one. And I think that all comes together to realize this idea of burnout in many ways. And I don't think it's limited to our field in any means. I know many friends who are teachers, many friends who are nurses, many friends who are in other areas and outside of computers that definitely weirdly enough, are experiencing the same thing at around the same time in their life, which is late 20s, early 30s, and usually in their first career, if that makes sense, either first career or first job.
Do you think it's becoming more like, how do you think like I'm thinking about like work from home, because I think like in our career, like I have been social distancing since before it was cool. By the way, if anyone hasn't seen Fireship's like 10 stereotypes video, I think I sent a tweet out. It is absolutely hilarious. But it's like his latest video. He was talking about stereotypes. But the work from home is, I think, like in our career, most of us really liked it. Like it worked really, really well, because for anyone who transitioned into security or went from an office to out, all of a sudden they feel like they probably get a lot more work done. But in other fields, like teaching and things like that, it's made it so much more difficult, because teachers are learning all these things that they weren't supposed to before. And as it relates to burnout, do you think like that's actually like has helped or has pushed it in our field specifically?
Do you think work from home has pushed
Yeah,
burnout
has
further?
pushed burnout
I think
further.
for many people, yes, absolutely. And I think I'm definitely not immune to that either. I think there was this going from being in the office. The way I like to explain this, right? In many cases, the way we work in a collaborative environment, if you will, quote unquote, is not this uninterrupted 8 hour stream of problem solving. It is an interrupted stream where maybe I work for an hour or two, and then I get up to stretch my legs, get a cup of coffee, discuss something with colleagues. And in many senses, that's still work, but it's a break from that intense level of thinking about a specific problem to, I need to give my brain a rest, and maybe I'll go riff on this other problem and try and be creative in some sense. And what I think, this is why I think in many cases, at least among many colleagues inside and outside my current job, they talk about, I probably work, quote unquote, 4 hours a day, which is like half the day. But I don't think that's accurate, right? Because I think those built-in breaks, that built-in collaboration time, if you will, that still qualifies as work. It's just a different kind of work. Your brain needs time to process things.
Mm-hmm.
And every manager I have ever known that thinks that me working means hands-on keyboard writing code has been one of the worst managers I've experienced. And I've experienced those managers many times in the past. And to the credit, I've tried never to be that person, and I've also not experienced that person since leaving some of my earlier career environments. And I think people have come to understand that that's not the case. But so when you transition to work from home, there's very few opportunities to get up, stretch your legs, and see another person face to face. Now, I think for many of us, I mean, I grew up as a relative hermit and talking to most of my friends over like AOL Instant Messenger, right? AIM, and chat rooms, because I'm ancient. So I think
It was IRC and Usenet before then.
oh yeah, and IRC too, right? Like I definitely use that as well. But I think we, as opposed to many other people who got thrown into this work from home environment, had already had this sense of, how do I socialize and riff and take breaks over a chat room interface and actually be relatively, keep myself relatively sane. So I think some of us adapted very well to that. I know I did okay, but in other senses, because you didn't have other people necessarily coming up to you and interrupting you, I think a lot more people started getting this uninterrupted 8 hour streams of work, and as a result ended up getting a lot more done in a shorter amount of time, but in the process just mentally wearing themselves out and not realizing where it comes from. And so it's this weird sense of like, I've never been more productive than I have in the past 2 years, but I've also never been more exhausted and tired of the thing that I'm doing, is a sense that I've gotten from many people inside and outside the computer science realm.
I think the other piece that I've seen, at least for myself, is especially when I get into a hard problem. And now, again, my own company, things like that. So I'm going to treat it differently, and I'm going to treat it more importantly than I expect my employees to. It's my thing. Of course, I'm going to spend way more hours than I'm supposed to on it. But even before that, when I was in consulting, I found myself when I was coming against problems, especially like doing a pen test or things like that, and even now, like as I'm doing a CTF, my mind isn't dedicated to going up and eating dinner or drinking coffee. It's churning over those problems
Hmm.
constantly. And I think like early on we were taught, oh, you could separate that and you had like a physical space and things like that. And like for me, I have one office. I don't have like a giant house where I have like multiple offices. And at this point, I'm now working and now I'm playing because my hobbies are like technology. I'm in my office. And I wonder if like that physical separation, at least like for some people, has helped. I don't, I think, I don't know if like, I feel like I'm coming across more and more problems. I'm putting on more and more hats, and it's forcing me to constantly be thinking around the clock and not necessarily like stepping away. And I don't know,
Yeah.
like,
And
I've heard that you have to step away, but what does that mean? Like, how can I step away when I'm going to be churning over this problem?
so for the first time in my life, even through my time in the military and through a lot of college afterwards, and through high school to many extent, I've always been a huge fan of MMORPGs. Right? I played Final Fantasy 11 for a decade. I continue to play Final Fantasy 14 today. And for the first time in my life, during this 2-year work from home stint, I found myself when I got done work not going back into my office to do anything. The computer was like the place that I blew off a lot of steam. When I got home, I'd go into my personal office or I'd go to my personal computer and I'd play video games and chat with friends. But now I find myself outside of working hours never stepping foot back in my office unless like I have a distinct, like unless I'm doing stream or I have pre set up things for that. And I didn't realize that transition happened until relatively recently, like the past 6 months. Like I would go up to my office and I would look in and I'd be like, I'm good. Like I don't want to be in here right now. I want to go play with my guitar, or I want to go play with this. I want to go do that. And it's been one of the first times in my life that I remember my mother saying very early on, like her path through computer science and being in the computer industry, she turned a hobby into a job, and then it became less fun, which doesn't mean you don't enjoy it anymore. It just means it became a job. And I'm finally experiencing that, I think, where I've burned myself out necessarily on doing computer related passion projects after work because I'm like, this is just more work.
It's funny you mentioned the MMORPG. I didn't. It was like our first year of college or second year of college. I had a roommate who absolutely failed out because of World of Warcraft, and he sucked me into a little bit of it. But I got into like that's where I met Bunny at Hardware Hacking. He ended up being like randomly my roommate who pulled me into like a whole lab and things like that. But I remember like the thing that intrigued me on the game was after obviously the escape. But more and more recently, I had a couple friends reach out and we say you should start playing League of Legends because it's a non-toxic community and people are extremely friendly and so helpful in the community. As like there's someone off the side of my room pointing something at me. No, I'm just kidding. It's a terrible community. But it's funny because I've always loved PvP. Like I don't know why. There's something about me. I needed to know that someone was getting upset when I killed them, when I shot them or whatever it was. When they got knocked out of the match, there was that wonderful feeling. And maybe there's like some psychological thing I should talk to a therapist about there. But like shooting at ones and zeros, like a computer generated thing, has never attracted me. But it's interesting because you play with certain people and they get so like into the game. Like don't get me wrong, I want to win, but other ones, like their whole life just starts feeling like it's falling apart if they're not winning the game, and they can suck you into that. Like all of a sudden you find yourself 20 minutes into a game and you're like, why do I feel like I'm playing a game? Why do I feel like crap right now? Because like, we're losing, it's terrible, and things like that. And it's interesting to me because I feel like we're in this. I'll try and tie this to maybe a point. More and more, I feel like we've put this stress as a badge of honor. I'm busy, I'm stressed, I'm tired, and it's like not like I'm busy, I'm stressed, I'm tired, please help me. It's like I'm busy. I have so many meetings. I am super important. And I can't help but think same way in in the game, I'm doing that same thing in real life when I'm hearing coworkers or whomever going, I'm so busy, I'm so stressed, because that's the badge of honor. I'm feeling, all of a sudden I'm going like, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling this, even though I'm not actually experiencing any of these. I'm more cognizant in like my business, but I think like back to my previous consulting job, you'd have people who have open schedules, but they were so busy, so stressed, and all of a sudden you're starting to feel stressed. And I wonder, tying this in a bow maybe, is with work from home, people are concerned, generally speaking, about that I'm sitting at a keyboard, staring at my computer, not delivering work because part of my process is just thinking. So in order to counteract that, I'm going to say, I'm so busy, I'm so stressed, I have so much work on my plate, because I'm going to communicate it to my manager who really doesn't actually know what's going on. And then that's just rolling the problem over. Does this make sense? That was like a really meandering.
I mean, I get what you're saying in some sense. I also think the thing that we are capable of escaping from when we are present with each other is being able to enjoy the small moments where we're able to riff and work with each other and discuss problems face to face and distract ourselves in some sense from the fact that work is infinite. There is always more work to do. No, right? You'll hear good managers say their work will be there on Monday. Take a break, right? The work will always be there on Monday. There is always more work to do. But when you're alone, sitting in your office, staring at a computer, staring at the list of things to do, you start to internalize just how much you have to do or could be doing. And there's very little direct feedback on a day-to-day basis as to what other people are doing. And I think that's why productivity in many senses skyrocketed during our 2 years major work from home. And I think in some senses, don't get me wrong, I'm not sure I entirely agree with this. I think in some senses, business leaders and managers are pushing the return to the office because they see this to some extent and they understand that. But I'm not sure I entirely agree that that's the solution, because work from home is here and it's here to stay. The end, like, get over it. Like, there is no amount of money or benefits that will get me to leave my dog home alone 5 days a week, 8 hours a day ever again. It's not going to happen. But at the same time, yeah, I lost my train of thought there. Like, I think I also think that there's a large number of people who are, not that they're incapable of dealing with the isolation of work from home in many sense, but they don't understand how other people can manage it themselves. And so you have this eternal battle between very social people who look at that as hyper isolation and painful, and them looking at the people who can manage it and enjoy it and seeing them as antisocial people. And so I think in many senses, it's also driven a wedge between those classes of people, if you will. And I think managers tend to be on the more social side. And that's why all of a sudden we're seeing this giant rift of people, burning out because they're working home a lot, and managers trying to force them back into the office. And those people who are burning out saying, no, I'm not going back into the office because I want to keep the 5 hours a week that I got back from not having to commute to myself, but also I don't want to do as much work as I'm doing right now, which is more work than you were doing probably before you were working from home. So it's multifactored, right? Like, it's not any one piece of this equation that causes burnout. I think also, I was going to mention this earlier, I think one of the things that people, and I'm starting to learn this about myself, it's not necessarily that you burn out permanently, but you can burn out on a project, right? Yeah. Like, you can be working on one project for too long and burn yourself out on that thing without realizing, and it's probably healthy for you to go do something else, which I'm actually in the process of doing myself. And it took me a while to realize I was in that position.
I think so. Quick, looking at chat really quick. Brandon or Squiddy, if the stream is having that many, once this thing ends and I have a chance to look at it, if it's still breaking up, what I'll do is I have a local copy. I'll bring it down and I'll re-upload it, so it should be working a little smoother then. But I will go back doing what we can. And oh, it's not my button's not working. Oh, that's so
No.
that's it's all over now. So I think like some of the it is interesting because you bring up that point of like social engagement. I think of like when I can only imagine like I've always been for most of my career I've been working remote, small consulting company, so it's very hard to like we'll say like to hide within corporate America. Prior to that though, I was at General Electric. And it was interesting. I can't even imagine the amount of productivity they've noticed because I think back to like when I was there, I could only get a solid 2 or 3 hours worth of work done, if that, because everyone wanted to come over and have a cup of coffee. And then it was like, oh, have you seen the new coffee machine? It's very fancy with its new instant coffee. And then, oh, hey, I have a question on this. I have a question on this. Like, I can't even imagine some of those. And that's what's interesting is I'm wondering if they look at the cost savings of the building, they look at how much more productive everyone is. And I think I'm going to bring this to maybe another point, which is they see all that and they're like, maybe we do continue this. And you have like managers and whatnot are pushing for it. But I think what we're also hitting is we as a general industry for cybersecurity, information security, software developers, we have zero idea how to actually foster a community which is remote. Like you have company culture. I don't know if we necessarily like have an ability to figure out how to build a culture with developers remotely. Like, developers are weird in general. Developers, security people, we can admit it, we're weird. But how do you do that? Like how do you foster a community?
I don't know the answer to that, and I think a lot of that discussion is actually misguided. Like in some senses, it's a job. Like, and if the more you try and foster this community where you're like, oh, we're all a family, we're all this, we're all that. I think that's all BS. Like it's a job. We're all here to make a paycheck. You want to put whatever sugar and spice on top of it, that's fine. But I think that general idea that you cultivate a community in some social sense is it's the socialites trying to imply the non-socialites into the system that they think should work. There's a rift there, I think, in some sense, but also like because there's a vast majority of engineers out there, or just UI UX people or marketers that could just happily do their 8 hours without any of that stuff whatsoever and move on. And they don't need that ethos. They don't need any of that stuff. But then there are some people that require that drive. So, or that require that engagement. So it's to restate your question of how do you create that community? I think it's a little more accurate to say, how do you create a workplace that feels open to discussion and innovation when you can't see someone face to face? Like whiteboarding is hard. This is one of the biggest things that I think we struggled with during the lockdowns and everything, is that I spent a lot of time at work. When someone would ask me a question and pick my brain on something, I just erase a whiteboard and go up and start drawing and teaching people, right? And we have a private VPN network, so it's not directly connected to the internet, any of that stuff, which is pretty standard for software development environments, right? And the question was, well, how do we get whiteboarding software, and can I send everyone a tablet so we can still do this? And there's like no good solution for that. How we still don't have a good solution for that in a closed network sense is bizarre to me. Like we couldn't figure it out, and we went looking for all the software out there, but it's all internet connected. It's all these, but there's no software out there that's easy to set up and that I can just send people a tablet and do this type of work. And I think that is one of the key missing pieces in this industry, is that lack of respect for whiteboarding time.
Yeah, it is interesting because like as we've been doing more and more stuff, like collaboratively, like moving companies towards like SOC 2 and whatnot, like I've yet to find a good solution to so many problems like whiteboarding or things like that. We've tried ClickUp, we've tried Notion, and like most of these things are very interconnected with like really crappy like security standards for them, where it's like there's no way we can use this. Like our clients would never trust us to do this. But like fundamental things like what, as you say, whiteboarding. Actually, the one thing we stumbled across, which was probably like the coolest thing ever, and I don't know why I'm like so excited about this, was running like creating a company's policies in Git. Like Git is obviously very much for coding and developers, but like we stumbled on this idea of like we could run a policy set inside Git, and like probably nothing to do with burnout. Minus that this just gets me super excited about this. You can create like, here's your information security policy inside Git, and then I need to create a new policy, and then I can do a PR into it. But if I have to change that policy, go ahead and change it. But what's great, you have a full auditing capability for all of your policies and every change you can do. Like that in and of itself is great. And then I had shared this idea with a couple other people in the company, and someone goes, wait, so if someone makes a mistake, how do you assign like blame to them? And I'm like, oh, you've never heard of Git blame. And then you get to see the history of who's changed it. And he anyway, it's like programming humor is now working its way through.
So I want to address a few things. I want to address a few things in the chat. First, there was someone said managers should stop sending emails at 9 p.m. and expecting a response from their teams. I 100% agree with that. In fact, like people should stop sending emails and expecting immediate responses to everything as if their thing is this is really like an executive control thing, not like business executive, just like executive control over your own priorities and respecting other people's priorities. I'm in the process of quitting my current job. And right now, everyone thinks their request is the highest possible priority because I leave in a week, right? And I've had to tell people, like, you are here on my priority list. You will get a response to this email when your turn is up, not when you decide it is important. And I think having that ability to push back, now, like I'm a relatively senior person, so I could do that. A junior person may not feel capable of pushing back like that, and that's a problem. And that's things that like good managers will say, like, no, push back on people and let me take the flak for you. That's fine. So that's one side. Like, yes, I agree 100%. Outside working hours, whatever you decide they are, just don't respond to things and set your boundaries hard.
Yeah, I'll double down on that one, because that one actually comes down to, that one is we'll call it a company culture thing, and that's something like when someone new comes on, the first thing I usually say to him, and I actually think this was like out of like the 5-hour workday or whatever, one of Tim Ferriss's things, but he was talking about like, for us, email is like USPS. It's like, I sent you a letter, you have 3 days realistically, and you might not get the letter because all of us get so much email. Then it starts escalating. Then we have like Teams and stuff like that. But even that, it's like people are heads down. They're working on a policy, and if they have to constantly context switch every time they get like a Badoop or like a Bing, like one of the things we tell most is like turn off the notifications, like check it every couple hours or something like that, and then you start escalating. As like at one point, I won't call you outside of a meeting or anything. We have Teams meetings and things like that. But if I send you a text or call, at that point, it's like something happened and it's an emergency. And then the one thing we also say, like, we don't really have these things. Like, it's very rare. It's like, hey, something happened over a weekend. We don't work in incident response. But the expectation too, like if we call on like a weekend, or so let's use that as an example. For us, if we call on a weekend, one, there's no expectation that you're going to pick up, nor any like bad feelings if you don't. And then if by some chance we do get you in, you're able to help and all of that, we stole that time. You get to steal that plus some back to recover it. And I think that's we'll say the culture thing, which I do think those are like strong boundaries, and I think that those are all reasonable too.
And I don't know if I would apply that as culture so much as good management, right? Like that, I guess that's a management culture, not necessarily an engineering culture, although I can see how it's kind of soft. So yeah, maybe it's a good work culture to have those kinds of boundaries. The second thing I wanted to look at here, people were saying Zoom has whiteboarding capabilities. Okay, uh, find me a platform that I can run on a closed, non-internet connected network that works on Ubuntu, Arch Linux, Red Hat, Windows 10, Windows 11, like go on and on and on. Because in a developer environment, most people are going to run whatever the thing that they want to run that is most accessible, and that's the nightmare within a software developing company of I want to collaborate, but everyone is on such different platforms. you know
Question: look, would closed loop I get, and there's compliance and things like that. What about like end-to-end encryption? Like if it was true end-to-end encryption, would it need to be closed loop? Because at one point you do need a server that everyone can hit, so that all these live interactions happen.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm not a I would say I'm not a DevOps person, so I don't know the difficulties of setting up large scale secure environments and what the difficulties are. I've worked in a variety of different secure environments, and I'll say every time someone tries to explain the various setups of how these things work, I'm always like, yeah, I'm gonna go back to writing my kernel drivers. You guys have fun. You guys seem like you enjoy it. I'm gonna let you do it.
It's funny. I'm looking at chat and I realize like the setup I have, chat sits like right over the lens. So as I'm like looking at chat, I'm just like intensely looking into the camera. People are like, what are you even doing right now?" I think it is kind of funny because I think like you want to work in a place that we'll say it supports you emotionally and physically. No, I mean like I think the technology so part of this I want to go back to earlier in our conversation because we talked about like you can burn out when it's like it started as a hobby and it was passion and then it turned into a job and you kind of lost that. And I like for me, I'm competing in NSEC CTF. Like right now, this stream is taking me away from it, but I'm enjoying it. It's fun. And I was up to like 3 a.m., which was a terrible mistake. But I am enjoying it. One, there's no point staying up to 3 a.m. because I'm useless now in the morning and I'm like 4 cups of coffee in and I'm still like, have you tried the dumb thing yet? Because you probably haven't tried that. But I think you can still have it as a passion. But here's what's weird, though, is I realize I had done pen testing for a long time, done security testing. I then did it as a career, and that was the time where I like kind of stopped doing a lot of the CTS. But now I feel like I've progressed enough where I'm not touching that stuff as much. And I'm wondering if that's why I'm picking it back up because now it's fun again. It's not necessarily work. I don't know. I also like we interact with Gator, who is like excited about all the stuff he does, has made a career of it and enjoys it, and is still dorking around on the side with all of it. So I don't know. Can you actually have a hobby and that maybe that's a question for chat. Can you have a hobby which is also your job, which you can keep your passion for, and not have it like corrupted by your work? Is that a valid way of saying that?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I don't know. Like I don't get me wrong, I still love software development. Like those moments where you have that strike of genius, if you will, or that moment of inspiration, and you can see the whole problem, and you just spit out the code to write the prototype, and then you figure out the design later. Like I really enjoy that. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't be 15 years into my career. Um, I would have burnt out much, much earlier. But I know people who have burnt out, and it's because they didn't enjoy it. And so they find industry adjacent jobs that fit their needs and fit their background because that's the reality. Once you specialize in something, that tends to be where you stick with it. Doesn't mean you can't pivot, but just tends to mean that you leverage the tools that you already have available to you to make make life. Anyway, but yeah. So I think it's definitely possible. But I have another colleague who personally I don't know if he technically homesteads, but he has a farm that he is working on himself. And we always like to joke that, I have half of a plum farming business.
Which is amazing to me.
And but we start to look around at our other colleagues, and it's weird because we're starting to see more and more software developers who are like, yeah, I'm gonna go play in the dirt for a while, and they start to garden or they start to do something that actually works with their hands. And we wonder if this is going to start to become a trend where more and more
There
software
it is.
developers are going to make their money and then they're going to get out of the industry and go homestead on a farm in the backwoods somewhere.
It's really funny because right now, me and my wife, we're looking for 10 acres just north of
Yeah.
us. To, legitimately, because I want a bigger garden. Like, I want to be able to do that. Like, I want to be able to work with my hands. And it is, I didn't think it might be a trend, but I think you actually might be right on that one. Uh,
So you were talking about Gator. The thing is that I think Gator would be a much more accomplished farmer because he has a much stronger maker background than definitely than I do. I'm more of a hacker. I like to take things apart as opposed to put things together, unless it's software. But yeah, I think like there's this funny gamut where I'm just like all of a sudden realizing I'm not very good with my hands. I should probably be good with my hands. Maybe I should go learn to fix a motor.
oh gosh, it is really funny because I actually think there's such a barrier to entry to some of those things, and like gardening is one of those things. I think like I get weirdly frustrating at times because I'm like, okay, cool, I've done it, and now grow, like go faster, like I've done my thing. Now you go, and you don't get like that instant gratification with it. It's like, okay, now I have to like wait a month, and this is okay. What's that? But I think it is like forcing a little bit to like slow down, and maybe this goes back to, I think you can getting in my own head is it's always, especially again, starting a business during COVID and things like that, where it's always like, all right, I've accomplished this. What's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? And maybe that working with your hands, it forces you to slow down. Like, do you feel that when you're doing like the farming, like you're okay, I'm able to clear my head, or no, it doesn't take you like a couple days to actually like get work out of your
Well,
head?
I mean, yeah, when you're out, like the last time I was up, we planted 90 trees. I mean, if you try to dig 90 holes as fast as you possibly can, you're probably going to dig fewer holes in that first day than if you'd taken your time, because you wear out faster, right? So, and I mean, like, I've done a lot of landscaping work throughout my childhood, so I kind of knew how to pace myself in some senses. But yeah, I think working manual labor teaches you how to slow down and think about what you're doing, if for only reason because when you work faster in manual labor, there's a much higher likelihood of injuring yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's something to learn from that. Like now that I'm thinking about it, we sit down and we have this high, as we would say in the Navy, high speed, low drag attitude towards software development and the software industry. And you can only maintain that speed for so long before you injure yourself because, eventually you experience fatigue and fatigue begets injuries. So maybe we need to start looking at it in that way where, physical work, you will eventually injure yourself significantly if you never learn to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the same with mental work, right?
I'm I'm kind of laughing because as we're talking about this, I realize this goes back to our gaming conversation with the MMORPG. Is you're effectively playing Farmville real life, and you're not like I'm realizing like you're building a plum farm, you're getting away. That's PVE, and I'm thinking about so much of PVE is remarkably boring to me. So I need to find out what is the real life PvP I need to get into because like this is something I was kind of laughing at with the CTF competition I'm doing right now. It's like it does feel like PvP because the moment you get something you want, like even in real life pen testing, like not that again, security is remarkably hard. Through no fault of the developer, vulnerability is going to get introduced into the code, or there's just third party over third party. So it's not like their flaw, but in some way, you can think about this like it's a victory when I find the flaw. When I find the flaw in software or in a CTF, like I've won against another individual. They created the challenge and I've beat them. So what is the PvP alternative to like gardening? Is there like competitive gardening I need to get into?
Sure there is. There's, you got to go to the state fairs and show off the biggest pumpkin, right? Like, look at my giant gourd.
My giant gourd. I would. Can I put? Okay, actually, this is a good segue. So we started talking about resumes, and actually, I think it was like someone dropped it in our Discord channel. Again, if you're looking to join a Discord channel with scientific hooliganism, like there's a link down below, which is the one we hang out on. But someone dropped a link from Cyber Mentor talking about resume building, talking about like he essentially Cyber Mentor wanted to hire for his company. And he interviewed, I don't know, it was 5 people. They were all similar in experience. They then went to this. They went to, looked at experience, did a soft interview, technical skills. And they were kind of left with like 3 or 4 people. And then they looked at the resume and they said the things they looked at, which started separating individuals, was showing like passion for their home lab, showing passion on a website project. And I thought back to all the times I've had to hire people. And at one point, especially when you're like 7,000 resumes, they all look the same. It doesn't matter who they search for OSCP. They all just look the same. They're all just like ones and zeros. I kind of think about the Matrix, redhead, brunette, whatever. It's like you're looking at the screen. It's all just code at a certain point. And the thing that differentiated the ones which they pulled out and continued with were the ones that, again, had these weirdo things in their resume, like the thing that pulled it out. Like, and I can't help but think if I was looking at a resume for a software developer and I saw own half a plum, like has managed half a plum farm, I'd pull that resume and go, I need to hear more about this. Like, I don't even care like anything else. I definitely need to hear what the story is here because there's definitely a story.
And, well, I think this kind of goes back to this idea, right? Like, and it's something I think almost all of us have heard in some sense, is that, oh, geez, I'm losing the word. Diversity is a value within a company and within any organization. And diversity doesn't just mean skin color or sex or any of those things. Diversity means a wide background of individuals who have seen a large portion of life, right? And that's why I think when a manager's idea, quote unquote, of a perfect resume is someone who has all the qualifications and has all of the hobbies that match perfectly with all of their qualifications.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like you. I want to know, like, okay, cool, you meet the minimum qualifications, but what's the rest of your background? What are you bringing to the table that that any other computer science background person doesn't have? The place I'm moving actually saw and said consistently throughout my interview process and all of that, they said, the thing we value heavily with you is your communication ability. And, because I have a large background in that, and I trained, I have a large background, I spent a few years in professional acting classes while I was in the Navy. I was being thrown up in front of captains and admirals and, O6s, even up to the chief of naval operations, things like that. In part because I like doing a song and dance. I like being in front of people. There's active risk when you do that. And I love that adrenaline kick of getting up and feeling like I could ruin my career right now if I say the wrong thing. No, and seriously, and some people get frozen by that. And I've somehow developed this sense of if I'm not doing that, then I'm not living.
Yeah.
But I also don't need to jump out of an airplane to get that. I can just go play some music in front of a bar and I can get my adrenaline kick that way. And that's really important to have as part of your team, right? That background, because if you have your, as they like to say it, as the managers like to say it, standard engineer who can't do that, which I take issue with, but we'll leave that for a different discussion. If you make up your entire team of that, then you're not going to have the ability to discuss things with customers. You're not going to have the ability to have marketing. You're not going to have the ability to, take customer requirements and translate them into product requirements and discuss with the engineering team. And so I understand that intrinsically, And so when I look at people's resumes, I'm definitely not looking for hobbies that say I have a home lab, I have these things. I'm looking for, here's I'm an artist, I paint. And
Yeah.
or I'm a photographer. Somebody said that they were a photographer in chat for, 22 years. Like now you're getting into this realm. That's a story I need to hear, right? Like
Yeah.
that's fascinating to me. And I want to know what you bring to the table with that, because I think that type of background experience breeds perception of problems and interactions with people that just having this pure sense of that perfect resume will often blind you to.
Yeah, it is actually really funny because some of the resumes I've seen lately, and actually some of the ones we're hiring, and I'm trying to think of, I think this one's easy, which is not too like on the like had a background in like biblical theology and like had multiple degrees in biblical theology, and that one was so interesting to me. Like, how do you make that transition from going into theology to now going, no, I'm gonna drop this. I'm gonna go to pen testing, or like I'm gonna drop it. And that was an incredible story, and it was interesting. Like, go on.
Oh, so what I was going to say there, and this is what you're really pointing at there, is that this idea, and I think this is very uh, prevalent on the internet, that that type of background, the biblical theology background, is incompatible with science. And if we look at history, through some of the best inventors, like the most famous inventors through decades, or not even decades, centuries, they have never been incompatible. And
Yeah,
so that when you see a resume like that, it makes you think, like, I gotta understand how this person works, because there's a lot to be said for like that. It's like you're looking at this person and you're going, you're a walking contradiction, please explain, right?
please
but
explain.
but the thing is like you can have that conversation respectfully, and I'm guessing that they've often had that conversation, and I think everyone will get a lot out of it if you encourage those conversations.
Mhm.
In many senses, I think, and I've seen this, many workplaces are sterile in that sense, where they discourage any of that discussion. And I think at least in my opinion, the best workplaces encourage discussions like that in a very, as long as you can keep it cordial manner. Like we
Yeah, I
shouldn't
think
go
that's
around
the
insulting people, right?
kicker. Fine, and this is what's kind of weird. This is one of those things which I do think is really cool within our field, and I do think this is actually pretty unique within, I would say, STEM fields. We don't have to say like hacking or cybersecurity, but just like STEM fields in general, is this love to have those conversations where you can extract emotion from them and talk to about like, because you often talk about, heck, me and you talk about politics and religion and all these things which typically would be taboo in most conversations, but in some ways I love them, is where you extract the emotion from it a little bit. And I think that's difficult within a workplace oftentimes, because like, passions can get high, emotions get high, and most people have an emotional response to those conversations. But
Yeah,
if you
it's good.
can have them, oh, I was going to say, if you can have them, I do think you're right. It creates as you say, a diverse background of multiple people who think differently, who are going to approach things as different with different perspectives, which yields ultimately better results most of the time.
I think it also builds friendships, and at least personally, I like being friends with the people I work with as opposed to just acquaintances. I think it breeds the ability to look at your friend and say, I disagree with that, and to be blunt about it. Whereas with acquaintances where we don't understand each other from maybe a cultural background, or many of those senses, we tend to go inside our own little bubble and be concerned with, well, I can't say it this way or I can't say it that way, type situation. And so you're not as honest. And
Mm.
I always like to say, I'm going to quote my acting coach. He's like, you should never be nice, because the word nice implies deceptive or a lie.
Mm.
Because, you know, because nice and honest are kind of the antithesis of each other. If you're being honest,
Yeah,
you can't
I'd see
be
that.
nice. And oftentimes when we're dealing with work, and design and software design, like you want to be honest. Like, I think this is a bad idea. Well, why? And it doesn't need to be personal, but sometimes, one thing that I think most people misattribute to engineers is this idea that they're not emotional and that they're like computers themselves, right?
Yeah.
But I take the opinion that software developers actually put a lot of love and emotion into their code.
Mm-hmm.
Ones that really care, they spend a lot of time thinking and they get personally attached to it. And so when you give feedback, if you are aware of that, you can be honest while also being cordial, where you can just be like, this design is bad. And you get that negative reaction, and you go, well, let me explain, or let's have a discussion about it. And it changes the way you approach feedback in that way.
I think also when it comes to like looking at code, and again, this was a newer world to me, was you get, as you say, attached to it because ultimately someone says, oh, you have a bug. Like, this changed when I started moving into like communicating more with developers, communicating like, because effectively when you find a vulnerability or something like that, in some level, it feels like you're calling their baby ugly. And you're then like, you're effectively saying, yeah, like, or like, I found recently, like, you almost like know the developers who have, we'll say, that passion or whatnot, because if you talk to them about like, hey, this structure is wrong, or this should be refactored, or like, these are the things which are improper in your code, there's two reactions. Either A, this first reaction of like, no, it's not, or like, hey, it's either like this, hey, help me make this better because I want my baby to be more beautiful. This analogy is not going to work. I want to take this criticism because I want to make it better. Or you get this like kind of fluff off, which is, it works, don't care. And it's weird because you meet it, you have to like make that split-second decision when you're on the phone with them. Like, is this someone who actually cares, wants to get better, like loves their code, or is this someone who just like, it works, I'm on to other things? And maybe that even does tie back to burnout a little bit, where you have, when they get to that, like, I don't care as long as it works, I'm on to the other thing. I wonder if that's like an indicator of burnout because they've stopped caring. They've stopped having passion, or no?
I mean, so the thing I'll say there is we're talking the abstract about something that is very specific.
Yeah.
Sometimes code doesn't warrant that level of scrutiny.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's just like, it works and I'm going to throw this away in 2 months. So who cares? Right. Like
Yeah.
that, it doesn't warrant any level of scrutiny. And some people just want to scrutinize. Right. So like, I think we're getting too abstract here in that sense.
Though the one thing I thought of when you're like, we're going to throw it out in 2 weeks. Yeah. How often does that happen? This code is throwaway code. We're going to throw it out with 2 weeks. 15 years later, it's that XKCD comic where it's that little piece of code which is holding up the entire structure, and no one knows what it does and no one can touch it at this point.
I had something happen to me in the past 3 years with that, where I wrote this little 50 line or so prototype to just demonstrate how to utilize an API and to write like an example. And they're like, oh, here's, instead of using the system this way, use it this way. And I wrote this little 50-line C program prototype to just demonstrate something. And then a year later, they were like, and here's a new product we have, this thing Gallery made. And I was just like, it's not a product. It's not a product. It's a prototype. Please stop saying that. Please stop saying that. Because no one's going to use it right out of the box, and they shouldn't, because they should take it as like, we should give them this code to use as an example, like a case study. And so it's just like, I learned that lesson very, very well in the past 3 years.
Oh goodness. Yeah. Squiddy.
Yeah.
We're so off topic. You know what? This begs the question we were asking this morning, which is like, I like talking and I like riffing, and we almost like force ourselves back to the topic at times, and I almost just beg the question, like, we probably need to actually figure out how we title the streams and then dive that way. Like, again, at the beginning of the stream, I said it's almost as if we have an idea what we're doing. We really don't. That's the truth of it, and we're figuring it out. But maybe like what we do is we come up with like that seed discussion and then just see where it goes afterwards.
I think this all somewhat relates to burnout, right? Because like one of the things I think that has come to the front in the past couple of years is that there is a diverse group of people, and burnout has been around longer than the past couple of years.
Mhm.
I know people who have burnt out of the industry before, COVID ever happened. And I do think it comes from a combination of, I mean, going back to that manual work on the farm thing, I do think there is less respect for how strenuous mental work is compared to physical work. And at the same time, the compensation model, if it doesn't fit the work that you're doing and the productivity that you're producing, that also breeds burnout because it causes you to think very heavily about your life choices while you're doing your job. And that
Mhm.
is, if you're doing that, you're already in a sustainable spiral, like unsustainable spiral rather.
Unsustainable, right?
And and that creates the situation of high turnover. We're seeing a lot with low wage jobs. I refuse to call them what is it, trivial labor or whatever it is, because the person who works at McDonald's feeds hundreds, if not thousands, of people a day. That's not trivial labor. That's hard, and
Yeah.
that's very important, right? But if they're not being paid enough to sustain their life, yeah, of course you're going to breed burnout in that situation. They're not, their basic needs aren't taken care of. And so I think this conversation applies all the way up and down the skill stack, if you will, or the compensation stack. It breaks at a certain point once you're a
Mhm.
billionaire like Elon Musk, who could just do whatever he wants and never answer for it. But like again, skirting the lines of being political, but like, yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for, we had this conversation in a very, I think, computer industry oriented perspective, but I think burnout is very similar no matter where you are, because some level of your basic need is not being taken care of, and you are overproducing and you're moving too fast and going to cause mental injury, going back to that, like working on the farm too fast
That's
conversation.
that's actually a that's actually a really good way of summing it up. Is burnout comes from a basic need not being met. I don't know if that's necessarily like the best definition, but I'm churning it over thinking about it, I like that definition. I think it ties back to communicate, one, having the self-awareness to know that you're A, experiencing burnout, B, recognizing what that is it compensation, is it stress, is it uh, too much work, not enough work, not the right type of work, but what is that? Enough self-awareness. I think the other piece, which is so interesting about this, is something we've talked about, which like most people don't know this about like the live streams and things like that, is like I was very hesitant to do them for a little bit because it puts you out there. It's like when I wanted to name my YouTube channel, like the other one, the Alex Chevrolet one, like you're attaching your name to this thing and you do it and you're expecting like the moment you do it, like holy crap, everyone's going to know and be judging me for it, though people are judging me for, no, I'm just kidding, is you put it out and you're like you feel like everyone's going to be watching you for it. And I think that it took it's kind of that conversation. I think I'm trying to think of how to attach this, which is having enough self-awareness to recognize what it is giving you the anxiety, what is that basic need that might not be getting met, which might be causing your burnout, and having, whether it's conversation with people, open up, whether it's conversation or just thinking, meditation, or whatever it is. But I think it's finding what that basic need that's not getting met is leading to burnout is super interesting to me, especially when it comes to like being more open, pushing yourself further. This is making any sense? I'm kind of meandered a little with that top point.
I kind of get what you're saying, but like I only just came up with that attachment, and like this is only a fully, what you guys are getting to experience right now is Silk and I having a stream of consciousness discussion. where none of this was pre-structured, right? We're riffing, and in many senses, like this, in some senses, is an exhausting experience to be on stream and just talking in an unstructured manner. That's mental exercise, but I always come off of these streams feeling somewhat refreshed because we're always honest with each other and we're going back and forth and we're often talking about things that I don't get to talk about on the regular in a corporate culture in some sense because you get worried that someone's going to take something the wrong way and all of a sudden you're talking to HR, right? Like
Yeah. I
you're like you say the words I'm burnt out and all of a sudden someone comes up to you and goes, we have to take care of this. And it's just like, hold on, now I just created another headache for myself, right?
I'm burning out about talking about my burnout. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. I
Well, we
think
always joke like the Navy, and I'll say that like I will say this blunt, the Navy is terrible about this. Because and the military in general is terrible about this because they're like, oh, mental health is really important. And then the moment you try and take care of your mental health, they're like, now we have to kick you out of the military. And they just took away your livelihood. And so like we talk about a negative feedback loop, right? Like, but that's the perspective that people have. And that's the perspective that a lot of companies have is that when you get someone who's experiencing this thing, you instantly have to change everything and
mhm.
that's often the worst thing that you can do because whatever sense of stability they do have, you've now removed them from it and caused more chaos, right?
I think like, something you just said though is like the I love this part of the stream. I love like it feels like it's hard. It's rough because it takes like an hour to get to this point because I kind of like forget I love this part of the stream where it is that you don't really have like we're not driving to our topic. We have abandoned the topic. It's somewhere over there. Like it's still semi related, but it starts feeling like we're in a conversation less of here's the information I want to get out there and more I'm now interested to learn what we're talking about. I know that sounds maybe a weird way of saying it,
No,
but
for sure.
with that though,
Virtual.
we're probably coming to that time, and I have been getting pings because the CTF is still going for NSEC, and I should probably spin back and actually help our team who is winning right now. I'm gonna just throw that out there, not because of me, because I'm obviously streaming right now, but we're doing well, and by we, it's a good team win. No, I can't. That's terrible. I had a coworker who would always do that. You'd accomplish something amazing. And he's like, as a team, we have done great, and you're like, I'm sure we have. with
Ben,
with that,
are you managing the team? Are you leading it?
well, it's my company now, so it's all a team.
Oh yeah.
It's all a team
It's all
win.
team silk. It's all
If
team silk.
it's all team. It's all team self. That's the thing. Is like if you fail, that's on you. But if you win, it's a team win. Right, right. No, this is manager advice right here. Anyone who wants to stick around for it, I'm filled with it. Just
Oh,
this is it's like one of those things that at times you're like, we had a joke for a while. We're like, we've had 0 days since the last HR issue. But again, you're in cybersecurity with the team. We're like, great, I'm nailing it right now. All right, with that, what's your parting thoughts as we close this on up?
everyone should probably get more sleep.
That is a very good point. Why are you watching the stream right now? Why are you doing this? Why am I on the stream? I'm supposed to be doing CTF. It's also up to 4 a.m. But you know what? With enough coffee, it's fine. You're good. Now, I think thank you for discussing. Thanks for joining us again on Hacker Hangouts. Much appreciated. Hopefully, we'll see you next week. And as always, hack on.